letting God fight our battles. Deep down, I think we all want that to be our experience. We want to see that become a reality in our life. But like everything else, how do we move that from just a concept to a reality we walk out, we live out, we experience? We experience the benefits and blessings of God fighting the battles. More importantly, how does it become a demonstrated reality where others observe God fighting on our behalf? They observe how he gives us the victory, not what we achieve, and he is glorified in the process. We all face from time to time challenges that are absolutely beyond us. And how do we approach that in a way to facilitate, to observe, to live out God fighting our battles? Now, on one hand, you have a group that takes a very passive position. God is all powerful. He's all knowing. He knows what's happening. Let's just see what's going to happen. Almost like pulling the cover over your head and just hoping for the best. But we also recognize that as we progress in him, as we grow in calling and purpose and destiny, understanding greater and greater what he has for us, a part of that is the recognition increasingly how he calls us to be an active participant in what he's doing. It's that partnering with God of recognizing he directs, he empowers, and we respond. But we can also go to the other extreme where it's just working it out in our own strength and strategies. And anytime we work it out on ourselves, if we bring the solution separate from him, separate from his leading, his empowerment, his direction, so on, the results will always be disappointing. So how do we walk it out? How do we make this a reality that we can rely on? You know, the Bible is filled with amazing stories of where God showed up and fought their battles for them. But one that I think is particularly poignant, and I do love, is Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat receives the news that this vast army is preparing to attack him. Its multiple nations have gotten together, and they're not just at the planning stage. They're not just even on the march. They're literally approaching the border. This is imminent. And it's a challenge far beyond their ability to handle. So Jehoshaphat wisely calls the people together to fast, to pray, and to approach God. And he prays this prayer roughly, that they stand before the temple, and he calls out to God and says, you are the living God. You're the God who gave this land to us. You've made us amazing promises. And you told us that if we approach you in this place in any time of crisis, that you will hear, you will see, and you will respond. And he goes on to say, we don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. He came to God with nothing other than the knowledge that God heard, he was all powerful, and he could respond. And what he got was a prophet who immediately had a word from the Lord. This isn't your battle, it's mine. Tomorrow, go to this place and effectively watch the victory I'm going to give you. So they're rejoicing. They go out the next day, worship team praising God in front, and they arrive to where God had directed them. And when they got there, we found that God had already fought the battle. He had not just defeated them, he had wiped them out. And they spent 3 days collecting the treasure, the loot, the spoil. That God, by God fighting the battle, he transformed a crisis of fear into this massive blessing where they are benefiting and God is glorified. It was something only God could do. But how do we walk that out in the real world? So I'm going to give you a real world example. Now, because of confidentiality, I'm only going to give you some very broad strokes details. But in the last financial crisis, a church found that the value of their property had dropped so dramatically. It wasn't just worth less than what they paid for it. It was worth dramatically less than they even owed on it. It seemed like a hopeless cause. And so they called asking me to come out and meet with them and advise them. And the counsel they had been given was to force the bank to renegotiate, to play hardball, so to speak. But in the course of the conversation, we kind of focused back on what was God's principle, that they, as unfortunate, as frustrating as the situation was, they actually had the ability at that point to continue to make the payments. And that it was about continuing to prove faithful to their commitment and leaving everything else in God's hands. That in this case, there was no other easy answer. There was no clear direction from God other than relying on his promise and his principles. And so the commitment was made to continue to just prove faithful without any specific promise or direction from God. Now, within a very short period of time, they called me back again because now the bank wants to play hardball with them. And without, again, going into confidential details, the end result, because they proved faithful and they left it in God's hands, the end result was that the loan was renegotiated to an amazing, favorable terms that allowed them, as the economy recovered, to dramatically pay down what they owed. It was a blessing they could not have orchestrated on their own. And God was glorified. So what do we take from this? Well, first off, like Jehoshaphat, whatever the challenge is, great or small, first thing we should always do is develop that ingrained habit, the response. The first thing we do in every situation is, rather than trying to work it out ourselves, rather than becoming passive and throwing up our hands, that we go to God for direction. Even if, as Jehoshaphat, we say, we don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. That we seek him first. And when we have a sense of direction, when we feel his leading, when we see the opening that God is providing, we respond to that in complete faith. But when we don't have a sense of direction, when we don't have a sense of promise and what to do, then we rely on his principles. We rely on his word, recognizing that faithfulness, commitment, things like that are the bedrock, they're the foundation of our breakthrough. That without specific leading, without God opening a door, we continue to rely on his principles rather than worldly, earthly wisdom. And in doing so, we are looking to him for the outcome, not what we can accomplish in our own strength. But we need to be a people that demonstrates, even in our partnership with God, even as we grow in leadership, etc., it needs to be a demonstrated reality that in all we do, as we grow in confidence, as we move in that empowerment, it's not just based in him, but it's based in the full expectation of him at work. And when that crisis, great or small, arises, and it will, rather than falling into that trap of working it out ourselves, even if we feel like we have the answer, it's taking that time to go back to God, looking for direction, and always confirming it aligns with his word and his principles. And in doing so, we are looking for God to be the one who fights the battles. We enjoy the blessings and the benefits. People observe, and God is glorified.